So we left off talking about there's 7 main questions that we want to ask from an administrative standpoint in regards to what do we need to know to manage our organization or our team members or employees through a merger when we find ourselves in those situations. So pre-merger, when we know a merger is going to happen, we're just getting prepared for it. A couple things we want to ask is or address for our employees is that, why are we interested in this merger in the first place and how is it going to be beneficial to us? So making sure that you have your elevator speech ready, what can you say to somebody to catch their attention in 15 to 20 seconds, the time it would take you to ride an elevator. So what's your 3 to 4 talking points on why this merger is a good thing and why we need to merge? The next thing you kind of need to talk about is what are you willing to not give up? What concessions are you willing to make as an organization? So we talk about organizational structure, our board membership, our governance, our policies and procedures. What are those concessions we're willing to make and those that we're not? And one of the last questions for pre-merger that we want to ask is, what is the organization's culture as a board of directors? Do we have unique processes that sets us apart from the organization that we're merging with, and how are we going to continue with this governance model? And then just following up, why are we passionate about maintaining this post-merger? A couple other things we want to consider is what is our decision-making process going to look like once we merge? So these are things, again, we need to think about pre-merger. What's that governance culture going to look like? And do we make decisions similarly, or are we vastly different in how we make decisions as an organization? What's our relationship between the board and the CEO going to look like? And then governance overall, when we talk about leadership and operational practices, are we moving to this being a culture, one dominating another, which, we can guess that leads us to more of an acquisition model than our merger model? Are we looking at maybe more of a merger of equals where we have both boards, recognizing that practices are going to be uniformly better together than the others separated? So we agree to adopt a new governance model. Maybe we're looking at more of a hybrid model where we create a new blended model of governance where we base it more on this systematic comparison of how one side and the other side do things and come up with our own best practices. So there's a lot of different factors to consider here when we talk about how we're going to govern and how we're going to run our operations and our leadership perspective. And these are all things we need to consider pre-merger before we move into the merging phase. So once we move into the merging phase, so we're talking about during and post-merger here and how we can continue to help build momentum. One thing that we recommend is you want to consider what we call an engagement before the marriage of the two companies. So we don't want to go from 0 to 60. We want to see, let the acquiring facility manage maybe a handful of services before we just turn the reins completely over to see if this is going to work. We need to be cognizant of any cultural setbacks that may lie out there and see maybe if this extended relationship is in our overall best interest. Now knowing that and taking that into account, there are some things that it just makes sense to integrate right off the bat. So we have different components from each hospital that we can go ahead and integrate in terms of services. We can centralize a couple of our staffing departments. We can go ahead and integrate our revenue streams. So those things make sense to merge together immediately. Some other things maybe we want to consider this engagement before marriage technique. And overall what we see is it's not a matter of operational integration, but more of cultural integration. So how do we continue with strategic planning and strategic thinking post-merger or during merger, And how we can do that and how we can be very communicative towards our team, towards our employees and our team, is just being very transparent, being very upfront with what's going on, within reason and within our ability of what's going on with the merger. That way we help build, we're not only are we being transparent, but we're helping build internal and external support for the merger overall, from our community and from our team members. So again, as we're moving through this, as we're moving through this merging phase and moving more into our post-merger phase, we want to make sure everything's balanced, particularly in a merger, where it's supposed to be a merging of equals. We don't want to have one company feel like they're being overtaken by another in a merger. Now, of course, that's going to be different in an acquisition model. But we want to make sure everything's balanced, and that we give recognition where it's due throughout the entire process. Again, just making sure that we're remaining or keeping those lines of communication very open, because we can have some very, very strong community actions. People get very heated about these things and take these things very personally. And rightfully so. This is going to affect them as a community, them as employees. There's a domino effect down. So we want to make sure that we're remaining open, and having those open lines of communication. And that'll lead us into how we assist our staff through this transition. So we can't expect that we're going to merge two cultures and everything's going to go great, overnight. That's just unrealistic. So we're going to have, we're going to have to develop these different leaders to kind of help transition our team through, and help our team overall, like it says, understand what it means to be part of this new system that we're creating. We're no longer Company A and Company B. Now we're merging together to be Company C. And what does that mean overall for them, and how do they kind of survive in this new environment? Again, a couple points just for during and post-merger, and how we continue to create this transaction and make it successful. We want to really think about synergy. So if you think about what synergy is and what that means, synergy is really more this concept that takes value and performance of two or more companies, and the thought is that those two companies combined are going to be greater than the sum of their parts. So they're going to be better together than separate. So synergy, we see this term a lot when we talk about mergers and acquisitions. So you may, hear this out in the field, and particularly if you're working for an organization that's about to go through a merger. And then just shifting that focus that we have to more of our quality measures versus the financial advantages that may exist out there. And all, for all the points that we've talked about so far, these larger systems are just going to overall help improve quality measures, because now we have the resources to do that. More of our successful merger experiences are going to help us translate those into future hospital relationships. So we have, the expertise with our selling points when we try to build our revenue stream, and then our expertise in systems when we have different transactions that go on within the hospital setting. But what's really going to be the determining factor are our relationships with our physicians. And physicians play a heavy piece in, what happens with the hospital system and what happens with the hospital overall. And they're going to be kind of that huge ticket item, if you will, when it comes to either a successful or unsuccessful merger or acquisition, because, we have to have the physicians on board as we go through this merging piece. So the key points to just sum up everything that we've discussed today. Again, like you guys have heard over and over again, but, we can't stress it enough that we are entering, this really critical point in history where we're starting to see this uptick and this trend in mergers and acquisitions. So this is something that is probably going to start becoming more commonplace, and knowing how to manage and work your team through it and what to expect yourself is really going to help you survive out in that environment and help you manage through that. Um, and particularly in our region right now, we have a really unique opportunity to watch what's going on with our two health systems here as they go through this merger process. And it's a good lesson, it's a good learning lesson for us to be able to kind of sit back and see how that works out. Guys, this is all I have for our Merger Mania lecture. This combined with what we talked about in class earlier today. So if you do have any questions, just let me know and we'll see you next time in class. Thank you.